Hello and welcome along to today's video. This is the big one. This is the one you've all been waiting for. The championship predictions for the 2025-26 season. Now before we kick off today's video, don't forget to like, share, comment and subscribe. And do not forget to turn on that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I make a new video. Enjoy the video. Right, so as ever, these videos are just a bit of fun. There's so much time left in the transfer window. There's so much more business that can be done, and there's obviously a January transfer window upcoming as well, where teams might strengthen even more or weaken even more. So, who knows where we'll be at the end of the season. But with where we are right now, which is Sunday evening before the season, Sunday evening before the season kicks off, this is where we are currently. These are my predictions. So yeah, and don't forget to put your predictions in the comments as well. So yeah, let's just have a bit of fun with this, and let's see how many we get right come the end of the season. Right, I think relegation is quite tough to call this year, to be honest with you. But the one thing I don't think is tough to call is who's going to come 24th, and I'm afraid it's Sheffield Wednesday. It seems to have been, never ending this summer in terms of things going wrong. The stand at Sheffield Wednesday had to close down due to safety reasons. Danny Roll has left. And, obviously then they had a load of players leaving as well due to not being paid. Who left Gassama, Famao, Windass, Wilkes, Valentine, Smith and Musaba have all left. Which I think could be quite detrimental for Sheffield Wednesday. So that's not good. The only recent light in a load of darkness for Sheffield Wednesday was Barry Bannon signing a new contract, which I think is obviously really, really highly positive news for Sheffield Wednesday, that he's committed, even though I'm sure he had offers to go elsewhere for a decent sum of money as well, you would assume. So I think there's been a lot of negativity so far for Sheffield Wednesday. They're going to have to use a lot of academy players this season. It's just not a very nice situation to be in at all. Horrible situation. So I don't think this season's going to be filled with many moments, if any at all, where there's a bit of light. But obviously best of luck to them, and I hope the whole situation can get resolved as soon as possible, because it's never nice to see a club in this situation. So yeah, I apologise, but Sheffield Wednesday are in 24th place. So now Sheffield Wednesday last, pretty much. The other two relegation spaces I think are very much up for grabs. I think there's a few teams who could be in a battle to stay up. So someone has to go last out of these few teams, and I have gone for Hull. Now they made a few signings so far this summer: Puerta, Lalui, Semi Ajayi, Akin Famao, and John Lundstrom as well. And obviously John Lundstrom adds a bit of a Premier League experience, which I think could be quite important. Semi Ajayi obviously been at West Brom, knows the Championship well. So I think those signings particularly have caught my eye. But then at the same time they've lost a few people such as Sean McLaughlin, João Pedro, Nordin Amrabat, and Alfie Jones. And I do worry sometimes that Hull change their manager, a bit too much maybe. It all stemmed back really when Liam Rosenior was sacked a couple of seasons ago, quite harshly I think. Even though he did have a lot of money spent on him and got a lot of loans that season. But I do worry if they don't get off to a good start. They might swap managers, and I just think this season will fizzle out, and I don't think they'll manage to creep across the line like they did last season. I think Ruben Sellers, I really rate him as a manager, as we'll find out later when I talk about Sheffield United. And I do think they made a mistake letting him go, but yeah, who knows? Hull might have enough to stay up, but for me, I just don't think they will. And then filling up the last relegation place, I have gone for Preston North End. Now, I think with Preston, I think Paul Heckingbottom, I really rate him as a manager. So I think they definitely got a good manager there, and they started this summer transfer window very well. So Odeluga Afire, who was on loan, I think, from Brighton last season at Blackpool, and he had a good loan there, which I think is good. Jordan Thompson, Thierry Small, Paul Valentine, Michael Smith, Daniel Jebison. A lot of good names there. Obviously not forgetting Daniel Leverson as well, who I think is a really exciting signing to bring back to the club, who obviously did well there previously on loan. And he's obviously been a bit, he's not been used at all at Leicester. So I think for his own career as well, to go back to Preston is a positive move, and it'll definitely help them out in the goalkeeping area. Because I think that was an area that definitely needed strengthening last season after injuries like Freddie Woodman. So I think, again, someone like Everson is a really positive goalkeeper change. Daniel Jebison, I think he's got the minerals to make it as a good Championship footballer, but we've not seen it just yet. And if he can put it all together, Preston could have an absolute worldie on their hands there for this league. And then, that could then push them to safety if a player like him is able to kick on. The one thing I do worry about with Preston is more that I think they've just signed quantity more than quality. I still think they're lacking goals, and I think that's the issue really with a lot of these teams that are obviously lower down in the table. I do think they're lacking goals. If Preston, can sign some more attacking players come the end of the window, I think they might then be able to push to safety. But with where we are right now, I do worry for Preston. I don't think they'll have enough to stay up. So now we're talking about the first of the newly promoted clubs, and I mean, this is probably the first time, for a long, long time, that and I'm sure many other Championship content creators have kept all three newly promoted League One clubs up. I think at the start of the transfer window, I did have my doubts for Charlton. After they won the playoff final, which obviously I think they deserved it in the end. They did well to get up here, but I did think they were gonna be coming straight back down to League One. But they've not messed around at all in the transfer window. They are very, very serious about trying to stay up. And I think in Nathan Jones, you've got a good manager there, knows the league well. And he kind of set the foundations, didn't he, for Luton to go up when they did under Rob Edwards. So I think he knows what he's doing at this level. So if Charlton can have a solid season where they manage to stay up, they might then be able to kick on. Charlie Kelman, I'm intrigued to see how he does. Obviously 23 goals last season in League One, which I don't think is anything to be sniffed at. I think that's a solid signing to see how he can adapt to Championship life. Obviously QPR chose to let him go, so QPR obviously didn't see enough value in him to keep him around, which I certainly think is interesting. But if Charlton managed to find a tune out of him, he could yet be a really good signing. Rob Apter as well from Blackpool. I think the general consensus was that Blackpool fans thought another season could be beneficial for him in League One. He got 8 goals, 4 assists last season. So they thought perhaps maybe another season in League One would have been better for his development. But, as I said, he's got the kind of raw materials now. So if he can push on, then I think that's just another really interesting player for Blackpool. Not for Blackpool, for Charlton. Tanto Arolofe from Stockport, another player. Could he step up to Championship level? Thomas Kaminski from Luton. Obviously, Charlton have been having a bit of a buy from Luton so far this transfer window. He obviously offers Premier League experience. He did well last season. He did well for Luton in their Premier League season, I mean. Obviously, last season wasn't as strong in Luton's poor year, but he did well when they were in the Premier League. So that's a really important player. Joe Rankin Costello as well, weakening Blackburn in the process of taking him. Really positive. Amari Bell, yet again another solid signing off Luton. Harvey Nibbs off Reading. I think these are players, obviously they're all from League One, but they're players that if they can step up, then I do genuinely think that Charlton could stay up, and they could even stay up better than 21st place. But I just have my slight worries about Charlton, not being able to go any higher than 21st. but that could change. But I do think they'll have enough to stay up. They have had a good transfer window so far, and if they manage to bring in some more players as well in this transfer window and in January transfer window, I think Charlton could have a decent season. So now in 20th place. So really, this is the point now where after Oxford, I think this is the point now where I'm like, I think these teams will be safe. And I'm a bit worried about Oxford. They're like the last team who I think could be in a relegation battle. They've had a few arrivals. They've had Brian D. Maka, who's a defensive midfielder from the Eredivisie, Brody Spencer from Huddersfield, Nick Preleg from Serie A, and Luke Harris from Fulham on loan. I do believe Luke Harris was on loan at Birmingham last season in League One. So they made a few decent signings there, young, exciting signings who, could kick on this season. But, I guess the worry is if they don't kick on this season, could Oxford find themselves, unlucky? I think they had the second lowest XG last season as well, behind Plymouth, which I think's a bit of a worrying stat from last season. So that's where I worry for Oxford. But, there's also a lot of things which I'm excited about for Oxford. The way the club is developing recently, I think's, quite exciting. I think Oxford have got a really good manager in Gary Rowett, as well, who knows this league like the back of his hand. And if they can build some momentum this season, and just manage to have some good runs of form, and start this season how they started last season when they were pushing near the top of the table. If they can start the season well, then I think Oxford might have enough to stay up. But I do have slight concerns about goals. But we'll see. I think Oxford are one to watch out for. But yeah, we'll see what happens with Oxford this season. But I have got them in 20th place. In 19th place, I've gone for Stoke City. And every season for Stoke seems to be a bit of a regression since they've come down from the Premier League. And, as I said, they're a very hard team to pinpoint. You don't know what you're going to get from Stoke every season. One thing I would say about Stoke is I think they've got a very good manager in Mark Robins, who obviously did a tremendous job at Coventry. Didn't manage to get them across the finish line to the Premier League, with it, obviously coming down to a penalty shootout. So he was that close to getting Coventry to the Premier League. I think Mark Robins is a really good manager. Traditionally at Coventry, I know they started seasons slowly. So, is that a Mark Robins thing? Is that a Coventry thing? We'll find out. If it is a Mark Robins thing, then Stoke might start the season off slowly, which could put them in a bit of trouble. But if they manage to then pull it back towards the end of the season, then that could also be a good thing for them. But I think they'll have enough to stay up. They might be in a slight relegation battle, but I don't think it's going to be anything too dramatic. I think they brought decently well. Maxime Talaverov from Plymouth who did well in the Championship last season for Plymouth, highly rated. So I think he could do well. You got the likes of Aaron Cresswell coming in from West Ham. Straight away, that's a lot of experience brought in from Cresswell. And, that sort of thing's important for, A, staying up, and B, possibly even kicking on. Robert Bozanic from Boa Vista in Portugal, that could potentially bring some goals. I think he got 5 goals, 2 assists last season in the Portuguese league. So, will he be able to kick on in the Championship? Sorba Thomas, I think that's going to be an exciting signing. Somebody who can get a lot of crosses in. So Stoke from set pieces could be dangerous next season. So that's one to keep an eye on. Divin Mwamba from Man City, somebody who's not had a ton of experience in men's football, but yet again somebody who could easily kick on, which would certainly be interesting. And if he can bring some goals, then I think Stoke will definitely be all right then. And then you got Ashley Phillips as well, who had a positive loan there last year. That's another good centre back they've got. I think the negatives for Stoke, they lost Ruta Berger, who for me was Stoke's best player. and I do think they'll struggle without him. But with the signings they made, I think they'll have enough to finish 19th place, which would be a regression from last season. But I don't think they'll be relegated or anything. Right, now in 18th place, I've gone for Blackburn. And, Blackburn are always a very hard team to call every season. Last season I did not have them to finish finish near the top six, because obviously they could have got even in there on the final day. They'd have managed to beat Sheffield United. So, they're hard to call. I think their squad's weaker than it was last season. And it could even get weaker now if Callum Britton was to, say, go to Middlesbrough, which seems a highly likely thing that could come to fruition. So if that was to happen, I think that just weakens them even more, which would put them down near the bottom end of the table. But, they've had some arrivals: Sidine Tavares, Dion Deneve, Ryan Alabasiu, and Sean McLaughlin. So, and Sean McLaughlin, for instance, he obviously knows the Championship, which I think is a positive, especially if you want to try and kick on. But then in the process, they've lost some quite key players, in my opinion. Joe Rankin Costello, he's obviously gone to Charlton. Tyrese Dolan gone to Espanyol. Andy Weimann, and obviously as a Bristol City fan, I know more than anyone he can bring aside goals, and especially a team like Blackburn. So I think the fact that they've lost the goals in Andy Weimann as well is, lost some goals there. I think that's quite a big miss, as is Danny Bath as well. So both of them went off to Derby. So, they've lost players, and in the process they've gone to Championship rivals, which I don't think helps matters. So I think Blackburn are going to have a harder season than it was last year, but I do still look at their squad and think, they will have enough to just be clear of the relegation scrap, but they could get brought into it. I'm not sure yet, but definitely mixed opinion with Blackburn. And who knows, by the end of the transfer window I might have a different opinion of them if they carry on buying. In 17th place, I've gone for Watford. Now, Watford are interesting. Obviously, they're stagnating a little bit in the Championship. Last season they started well under Tom Cleverley, but then it really went dire towards the end of the season. They had some really poor form, in the second half of the season. And if that had been like the case in the first half of the season, they could have been in a relegation battle. So, so it wasn't a brilliant season for Watford. All things considered, it was a bit average when you balance out starting well and ending poorly. But they made some really exciting transfers, to be fair, considering things looked really bleak at the start of the transfer window. Nestori Irankunda from Bayern Munich, an exciting winger who has the potential to be, absolutely brilliant at Championship level. So if he manages to find his feet quickly, and if Watford can get the best out of him, then they could have an absolute star boy on their hands there. Othman Mama as well from France, Luca Kjærgaard, who's a good striker. So that could be another interesting deal for Watford, could add some goals into the side. Nathan Baxter, another goalkeeper to add to the goalkeeping department. And then Mark Boliff. So I think overall it's there's been some exciting signings there for Watford. But I do still have my doubts about Watford. I'm not sure. They're a very unknown side ahead of next season. So I think kind of putting them about 17th is about right, because I don't think they're going to be in the top half of the table. But I think they've got enough to be just clear of a relegation scrap. So so it could be an interesting season ahead for Watford. But if they could have a consolidation season, then who knows, they could push on then in the near future. Now, for me, this was probably the hardest team in the league to pinpoint where I think they're going to be this season. And that is obviously Wrexham. And I think other people have had similar headaches figuring out where where they could be. I think it took them a while to get going in this transfer window. Obviously, they've signed Lewis O'Brien, who I think is a very exciting midfielder at this level, as proven by his loan at Swansea. Someone like Connor Cody, I think he's very good for the dressing room. The doubts I have with Connor Cody is the money they'd be paying him for the minutes he's played over the last couple of seasons. But obviously Connor Cody's somebody who's played at international level previously as well. So I think overall he can bring a lot to the dressing room, which could make the signing very, very important, especially if it propels him up the league. George Thomason, who's looking to make the step up from League One, who also played for Bolton, that could yet be an exciting transfer. Ryan Hardy, he got 10 goals for a relatively poor Plymouth side for the majority of the season last year. So somebody who can find the net at Championship level. Danny Ward, I think when he has played at Leicester, kind of since Schmeichel left, when he was like the number one for a period, he wasn't great at that time. And you'd hope Arthur Okonkwo will get a chance to, be the champion, be their number one in the Championship. But yeah, I think Danny Ward adds experience to the goalkeeping department, so I think that could be relatively good business. And then Ryan Windass as well. I think he's good at this level, and to get him on a free transfer is a bonus. So if all these players can click for Wrexham, I think they'll have a solid, lower mid-table season right now with where they're at. Phil Parkinson obviously hasn't done well previously at Championship level, but I think he's done so well at Wrexham so far, getting them through the leagues at the pace he has, I think has been very impressive. So I think Wrexham are definitely one to watch out for next season, but I'm still not 100% sure where I stand with them. If they're higher up in the league than I've got them come January, it wouldn't surprise me if they go and splash the money out in January to try and make a push for the playoffs. And equally, if they're fighting relegation, then that could also be a point to spend their way out of the battle. So that's kind of why I think Wrexham will be mid-table, lower mid-table in kind of 16th place. And the fact that I don't think that they're going to be particularly worried by relegation, but I don't think they're going to be able to kick on yet. But in a couple of seasons' time, it wouldn't surprise me if Wrexham are then in the playoff conversation. But for me, I don't think they'll be in it this season. In 15th place, I have gone for Portsmouth. Now, Portsmouth, last season, it was a solid season for them, finishing above the relegation zone, which was the first thing they needed to do last season. Because if they'd have gone on and got consecutive relegations, that wouldn't have been good at all. So I think the fact they stayed up last season was a positive. Their home form was, really, really impressive last season. And I have no doubts that will continue into this season. Fratton Park will be a very, very tough stadium for teams to come to. The one thing they need to improve on is their away form, because that was very, very poor last season. It's kind of the defensive side to Portsmouth as well is one that needs to improve. And I can't say they've done as much business as I thought they do in terms of defensive signings, because I think when that's plainly the main issue, I'd say, at Portsmouth right now. That's like the kind of thing I think they should be looking to improve on. So it wouldn't surprise me if they make a couple of defensive signings before the end of the window. They got Mark Kovzanowski in, who's a young Hungarian midfielder who has the potential to be quite interesting. John Swift, who I don't think set the world alight at West Brom by any means, and I think he had a poor season by his own standards last season. But to get him on a free, I think it's not that risky, and it could turn out to be really important, especially if they're to consolidate their progress from previous seasons. And if they just manage to have another solid season, improve on some of the things they weren't as good at last season, then I think in a couple of seasons' time they could be ready to carry on steadily pushing up the league table. In 14th place, I've gone for QPR. Obviously, it's been a manager change at QPR this season. Julian Stephan coming in from France. So obviously he's untested at Championship level, let alone English football, which makes things interesting. So I think the appointment's a risk on that behalf. I don't think his CV's too bad though. So I'm interested to see can he sink or will he sink or swim at championship level? So I'm not sure yet what we're going to get from him and his QPR side. Obviously the first 10 games or so will be quite telling for their season. I think they've done very good business so far this transfer window. Roman Burrell, who's joined from Burton, that could be quite a cool signing. Karamoko Dembele, who's joined on a permanent as well, another big one. And then you've got Kwame Poku as well, who I think is one of the signings of the summer. I think he's somebody who's been very sought after in the championship, not just by QPR, but all these different teams. So for QPR to pull that deal off, I think it's really, really exciting. And when you've got the prospect of like a Poku, Dembele, kind of attacking partnership, I think that's really, really interesting, and that could really push them on. Obviously, they've lost Charlie Kelman. We spoke about him earlier. Will that turn out to be a bit of a stupid thing to do, or have they done well getting a bit of money for him? I don't think he particularly wanted to stay at QPR, so maybe in that regard it was a good thing to get rid of him, so they managed to get a bit of money, especially after his stocks are so high after a really good season last year. Kenneth Powell and Morgan Fox have also gone. So I think really for QPR, they're going to have a lower mid-table finish. I don't think they're going to be in the playoff race. I don't think they're going to be in the relegation race. And I think Julian Stefan will last the whole season, and then see where they go from there. In 13th place, I've gone for Swansea. So Alan Sheehan's obviously their permanent manager now after being caretaker towards the end of last season. Now I say this every time a caretaker, who was promoted from within the club, when they get the full-time gig, it doesn't always work out very well. A specific moment I remember as a Bristol City fan was when Dean Holden was appointed, during the COVID season. And then, it started well when he was appointed, but then it all went really downhill. And come the end, it just felt really, quite sad the way it ended. And I'm not sure whether it could be a similar story for Alan Sheehan. I just think it's a big risk appointing your assistant, but I think he's quite popular amongst the Swansea fans, and who knows, he might be the one to break this kind of opinion of caretakers not doing as well being appointed full time. I think they've had a solid transfer window so far. Ziadine Inusa, who's a Swedish winger, obviously he's got a lot of potential to kick on. Ethan Galbraith, who I think, after a brilliant spell at Leyton Orient, he could easily be really good at championship level. And I think Swansea's a good job for him, a good kind of club for him to show what he can do. Cameron Burgess as well from Ipswich, a good experienced option there who, I think they've done very well poaching off Ipswich really. So I think, there's a few really good signings in there, and I don't think their squad's looking bad at all from last season. After, from the point of last season. So it's interesting with them really. Obviously Harry Darling's left to go to Norwich, but I mean he was always seemingly going to leave because he wasn't willing to sign a contract. Then Jerry Yates has gone to Luton because he was seemingly not in Alan Sheehan's long-term plans. So I don't think the losses have. I think the incomings have outweighed the outgoings, and I think they're in a better position than they were last season. And if they can carry on the momentum from the end of last season, then I think that could be one to watch. So keep an eye out for Swansea. Now Derby I've got in 12th place, and I think they're going to be a very exciting team this season. Obviously they got John Eustace, who jumped ships last season from Blackburn to Derby, and I rate him as one of the best managers in the league. So I think there straight away is a really positive thing for Derby, and I think him and Derby will carry on progressing together. Which is really, really cool. Patrick Agyemang, who's signed from America, that has the potential to be a really solid signing. Ryan Brewster, I'm unsure of whether Eustace will be able to get the best out of Brewster. As I rate Eustace so much, if anyone can get the best out of him, it might well be Eustace, but Ryan Brewster, for what Sheffield United paid for him, was very poor. But as I said, who knows? One day this could turn out to be a really, really good move. Andy Vyman and Danny Bath, who we spoke about coming in from Blackburn, straight away offers experience at this level, and Andy Vyman brings you goals, as I'm sure Derby fans already know from his time at the club previously. Carlton Morris, more goals there straight away, Premier League and Championship experience. And at a decent age as well. So I'm really excited with how they're looking attackingly next season. I'll say that. And then obviously they got David Ozo and Owen Beck as well. Two exciting Prem loans there. So yeah, I think Derby are lining up very nicely next season. I don't think they're going to quite be in the playoff race next season, but I do think they're going to be hovering in and around the playoff race. So yeah, it could be a really exciting season for Derby fans. In 11th place, I've gone for Middlesbrough. Obviously, they're very tough to pinpoint. I think Rob Edwards this season has a point to prove, because obviously he did really well getting Luton to the Premier League, and they didn't do too badly in the Premier League. It was very much an almost season if they could have just stayed up. But, in the end, they didn't stay up, and then obviously he came back down to the Championship. And I don't think he was given a lot to spend in his first window back down in the Championship, because Luton were putting a lot towards their new stadium. So could that turn out to be a bit of a mistake? Only time will tell for Luton. But and it kind of already has now that they're in League One. And I think that didn't help Rob Edwards last season. So he's very much got a point to prove, because if he can do a good job at Middlesbrough, then I think his stocks go straight back up. And then obviously if he doesn't do as well at Middlesbrough, and I'm sure he's going to have a lot more money spent on him as well. So I think they could turn out to be a very much a playoff team next season. But I do think they're very tough to pinpoint. Abdullah Kante, young exciting midfielder from Troyes in France. Alfie Jones, centre back from Hull. Good at this level. So I like those signings straight away. And, I think there's definitely more business to come from them. I heard the other day rumours of Chuba Apcom possibly returning. That could be exciting. So if Middlesbrough manage to get these sorts of deals done, Middlesbrough could easily be in the playoffs. But I think with where they are right now, I can't warrant putting them any higher than 11th place, especially with some of the teams ahead of them. In 10th place, I've gone for my team, Bristol City. I think this season could be an interesting one for us. I think last season, to obviously get to the playoffs, we overperformed really last season to get to the playoffs. It was a lower quality league last season, much lower quality than it is this season. But obviously we still got it over the line, no matter how we did in the playoffs, which we weren't good in the playoffs at all. But I do think we started to tire towards the end of the season. We went into the playoffs with limited-ish momentum. Obviously we drew to Preston on the final day. But before that we had some bad defeats really, and we kind of tripped over the line into the playoffs. And then obviously Sheffield United just tore us apart a bit there. So I don't think it wasn't a good end to what was a positive season last year. Finally breaking the playoff curse. Gerhard Struve, but I'm interested how he can do. Obviously kept Barnsley up during the COVID season, albeit with the Wigan points deduction helping that. So hopefully he'll be able to replicate what Liam Manning was able to do here. Emil Rees has come in, so a proven goal scorer at this level, 12 goals, 2 assists in a poor Preston side last season. So I'm excited to see how he can do. Joe Lumley, who was originally signed as a backup, who has quite a bit of experience at this level. Adam Randall from Plymouth as well. I like that signing. I think that's a good midfield option. I think it was viewed as perhaps a replacement to Knight, but Knight hasn't gone just yet. He might do, but nonetheless a good option there. And then Radek Vitek as well, who's a 6'6" goalkeeper from Manchester United, to add competition with the maxillary injury. Naki Wells, Cal Naismith have both gone to Luton. I think Nahki Wells, I'd have rather Nahki stayed. I think Nahki still had a lot to give, but I think replacing him with Emile Reece is still a good replacement. So I can vibe with that. And then obviously Marcus McGuane to Huddersfield. So City are an interesting one to watch next season. So let's see. But I do think the teams above City have just got a little bit more right now. So yeah, we'll see. But hopefully we can still be in that playoff battle. That'd be the important thing. In ninth place, I've gone for Norwich. So obviously Liam Manning new there. I obviously know him from his time at City. And yeah, he's had a lot of money spent on him so far. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure for him to succeed, because this is the first club I think Manning's been at where he's really had this ridiculous amount of money spent on him. Because I think last season he did well at City, getting who he did. But I do think this time at Norwich he really has had a load of this money to spend. You got Matthias Kvidsgaarden, Danish striker, 11 goals, 4 assists in 19 games in the Danish Superliga. So he could be quite a good signing. Amadou Diallo, winger from France. They've had a bit of a goalkeeper overhaul as well, which I think was definitely important after their goalkeeping choices last season. So yeah, that's definitely a positive. They managed to do some good moves on the free market, the free agent market as well. Harry Darling, who Liam Manning previously worked at MK Dons, which I think will strengthen their back line. Jeffrey Schlupp as well on a free, I don't think can be sniffed at. And then outgoings, obviously they've lost Jonathan Rowe and Borja Signs, which has banked them a lot of money to go ahead with all these transfers. But I think the big question for Norwich is, will Josh Sargent still be a player come the end of this window or the end of the January window? If he is, then I do think Norwich could easily be in a playoff place. If he goes, perhaps that changes, but I do think whatever the way, they are going to be in a playoff battle next season. In 8th place, I've gone for Millwall. Obviously Alex Neil did a good job there last season after he arrived mid-season. So I think Millwall are definitely ready now to properly cement themselves in battling for the playoffs. Josh Coburn's coming permanently now. Obviously they pay quite a bit of money for him, but if he can stay fit, then I think that could be a really, really good signing on a permanent. Massimo Luongo as well from Ipswich. That adds a lot of experience to the midfield. A bit of know-how on how to get out of the league. Stephen Bender as well, because obviously Millwall had a bit of a goalkeeping crisis towards the end of the season. So I think adding someone like him, who obviously wasn't really going to be playing at Fulham, is a really solid piece of business. So overall, they're in a better position than they were last season. And obviously the league has got stronger, but I think Millwall will pretty much stay where they were last season. I think they'll be in there until towards the end of the season, but I think they might just fall short because I think there's a few teams who are slightly better. In 7th place and just missing out on the playoffs, I've gone for West Bromwich Albion. Now this was another team who I could have probably put them at a load of different places in the table. I think Ryan Mason, for me, is a really, really exciting manager. Somebody who I think, I've been pushing for Bristol City to have previously. Because I think he's the kind of manager that could really, really kick on. Obviously, he's had a couple of caretaker spells in charge of Tottenham, which I think he's done well when he's had that chance. And obviously, he wasn't ever going to get the full-time gig at Tottenham. But for him to come to Championship level, come to a solid club like West Brom, I think that's a really positive move for his career. What I would say is I think West Brom need to give this time. It could work straight away. And they could be in the playoffs next season, and equally they could be a bit further behind playoffs. And if they are, I don't think they need to be worried. All they need to do is just keep Ryan Mason, I think, because give him time, and I think that could really pay off for West Brom. And I think in the next few years, Ryan Mason could be a really sought after manager. And then obviously they had some decent incomings. Orn Hegbo, a Norwegian forward. And then the ones I really like, Nat Phillips and George Campbell, who are going to strengthen the centre-back department. So, personally, I don't see West Brom shipping many goals next season. I think West Brom's home form's already good. So, I think, they've roughly got the minerals to be in and around the playoff race. It just purely depends how quickly Ryan Mason settles. And if he settles like I think he is, then I think they're going to be in and around the playoff battle, but I do think they are just going to fall out. In 6th place, I've gone for Coventry City. So they've had some decent incomings here. I think Kane Kessler-Hayden coming in from Aston Villa was really positive. Obviously, last year he had a really good on loan at Preston, who was their young player of the season and their player of the season. So I think that will only strengthen them. And then Carl Rushworth as well. Obviously, Coventry were crying out for a goalkeeper after an injury to Dovin. So I think Carl Rushworth, he's good at championship level. That'll keep them going at least until Dovin comes back, and I think probably beyond that as well. Obviously, they've lost Louis Binks as well. I don't think that signing quite worked out, so I don't think that's the biggest disappointment ever. So I'm intrigued to see how they can do with the pre-season under Frank Lampard. This is a big moment for him now. Can he really kick on this season and get Coventry promoted? That's what I'm really interested to see, because that could be good for his career as well. In 5th place, I've gone for Leicester. The biggest thing here for me is this potential points deduction they got coming their way. It's rumoured to be about 9 points potentially, and if that's the case, then I think that'll probably put them to about 5th, because I think they've got the squad to be in and around the automatic mix. So if you're not 9 points off in quite a competitive championship, I think they'll be about 5th place. I don't think they're going to drop out of the playoffs. I think they've got enough to be in there, but yeah, I'm not sure they'll be able to get automatics with a potential points deduction. I think Marty Cifuentes is a good manager at this level. Obviously was on gardening leave towards the end of the season at QPR. Asmir Begovic as well adds a lot of experience to the goalkeeping department, which I think could be important, especially if Hermansen was to go and they were to rely upon Stolar Cars. So I think that could be a really good move. It's their first season, obviously, without Jamie Vardy for the first time in a very long time. I think could be a transitional year for Leicester. But I think the important thing for them is bouncing straight back to the Premier League, because if they don't go up this season, it could be a tough then to get back up, because then they'll probably lose some more players. So they need some more incomings, but the squad's still looking strong. In 4th place, I've gone for Birmingham City. It's so hard to put Birmingham, outside the playoffs, because with the squad they've got, it's very much almost an automatic contention, in my opinion. Chris Davies at this level is going to be quite interesting to see how he does. But yeah, the summer's just been sensational for them. Kyogo Furuhashi, who's arrived from France, an expensive signing, but very high potential. Brighter Sai Samuel, free transfer, very explosive kind of option. Who's obviously previously done well at this level. Kanya Fujimito, who's arrived from the Portuguese league. Damari Gray, yet again, that's experience with English football. Tommy Doyle from Wolves, a very impressive signing. I think he's done well here at in previous chances. Aaron Cashin, good young centre back from Brighton, obviously previously at Derby where he did well at this level. So I can't fault them. James Beadle as well, even though I'm a bit more concerned about that signing, because I think he was a bit inconsistent last season, had some poor games, was obviously dropped towards the end of the season at Sheffield Wednesday. So I think that's probably their weakest department, which says a lot. So they're building a very strong team ahead of next season. So it wouldn't surprise me if they're in the automatics, but I do think the teams above them just have a slight bit more. In 3rd place, I've gone for Sheffield United. So they kept the core of the squad from last season. Obviously had Louis Barry coming in from Aston Villa, who could be a really exciting signing if he manages to stay fit, unlike last season at Hull where he wasn't able to stay fit. But he was highly impressive on his loan at Stockport, and he gives Sheffield United a bit of a different option. So I quite like that signing, really. I think that's added to an already strong squad. And then you got the so I think that's looking solid. Vinny Sousa's left though, which I think's a bit of a disappointment for Sheffield United, but they have still got people like Hamer still here, which I think's really positive. So if Sheffield United manage to keep them, then I don't see any reason why they're not going to be in the automatics conversation, at least in the playoffs. But it wouldn't surprise me if they go up next season. And I think you've got a good manager there in Ruben Selles, who's very much like a tactician manager who wants to do well there because it's a big opportunity as he's seemingly got money to spend, and he's inheriting a good squad, which is different to what he's had at previous clubs like Hull and Reading, where he was under different circumstances there. So I'm excited to see what Sheffield United can do this season. In second place, I've gone for Southampton. So this is obviously Southampton now led by Will Still, and I think he'll be able to succeed at Championship level. He's done well elsewhere, so it's a big opportunity now for him. Finally getting an English football chance. So if he can succeed, then I would imagine Southampton will be doing very, very well. Damien Downs has arrived from Cologne, Joshua Quarksey from Hoffenheim. So, a couple of really exciting signings there, and I can't wait to see how they get on. Ramsdale's gone on loan to Newcastle, where they've got an option to buy him. So that's going to be a bit of a miss for Southampton, as obviously, he was such a good player, such a good goalkeeper at Premier League level. But nonetheless, they've still got a very, very strong squad. And for me, it's about the mentality they've got after last season's horror show in the Premier League. Are they going to be able to pick themselves back up? And if they are, and I think that could easily happen with someone like Will Still, and if they can, then I think Southampton could head straight back to the Premier League. But I don't think they've got enough to challenge a team in first place. Now, I don't think it's unpopular putting Ipswich first place at all, because I've not seen any predictions yet that haven't put Ipswich first place. So let me know in the comments down below if you've not got Ipswich to win the league. But I do think Ipswich are a very good bet to win the league, because they've got, in my opinion, the best manager in the league with Kieran McKenna. I'm sure a lot of other people would echo that as well. Azor Matuosa as well, defensive midfielder from Ligue 1. Ashley Young, another experienced option to help get them back to the Premier League. Who's obviously 40 now, I think he is, but I think he can still offer a lot in the dressing room. Obviously had England experience previously, so I think that's a really positive signing. Cedric Kipre as well, very good when he was last in the Championship, so that can only help their back line. Obviously they've lost a few key players in previous seasons gone by. Liam Delap obviously wasn't ever really going to be staying around at Championship level, and he managed to get a move to Chelsea. Axel Tuanzebe as well, I really rate him, so that'll be a bit of a miss. And then Sam Morsey and Massimo Luongo as well leaving. So they've lost a bit of experience there, and obviously some younger players, but I think they've replaced them very well, and I think the squad is still looking very solid. So for me, Ipswich are going to be going straight back up as league champions to the Premier League. Anyway, guys, we've reached the end of the video now. I hope you really enjoyed that video. Don't forget to like, share, comment, literally write down your tables, wherever you got your side. It promises to be a very exciting Championship season, very competitive, especially after last season where it wasn't as competitive. So get your predictions down below. So don't forget to subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you'll be notified every time I make a new video. And I'll try and keep the content coming. Obviously, I'll be releasing my Championship predictions for Game Week 1 very, very soon. And then next week, I'll do a bit more of a Premier League focus just before the Premier League season starts. As I will hopefully carry on doing some Championship content as well. So a bit of everything coming your way. So hope you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all next time.